My colleague from ECRE already mentioned some of the issues that are of concern to ECRE. So I wouldn't repeat them, but maybe I would also briefly would like to highlight that indeed we think that comparing to the solidarity shown by the Syrian neighboring regions, Europe can certainly do more to protect Syrian refugees, and the numbers of Syrians applying for protection in Europe are not too high. For example, over 50,000 Syrians sought asylum in 2013, so these numbers are not really huge. The treatment of Syrian asylum applications is divergent across Europe, and as my UNHCR colleague also mentioned that most people that are getting the subsidiary protection, even though many Syrians are likely to qualify for the refugee status. So this is something which is of concern to ECRE as well. But like one of the main challenges that we think that Syrians are facing in Europe is reaching Europe's territory and also finding protection there. So there is a lack of safe legal channels to access Europe, and often Syrians, they need to take life-threatening risks, and I'm sure many of you know what consequences it can entail. But even when refugees are able to access the territory, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would get effective access to protection, and we have quite a lot of information that Syrians are unable to register their asylum application, and they are lacking information about such an opportunity as well, which actually undermines the whole concept of the common European asylum system. And also many Syrians are facing pushbacks. We had some information that Syrians can be returned to the neighboring countries, and Syrians fearing prolonged detention and being returned, they prefer traveling to the European countries with a more efficient asylum system. And as I mentioned, like pushbacks are something that's very worrying, and like read some information on the pushbacks from Bulgaria to Turkey, like there are certainly pushbacks of Syrian asylum seekers from Greek and Land Sea borders, and there are also cases of serial treatments occurred during these pushbacks. We also are aware that Syrians are arriving in the EU often in families with children, and a number of member states they do not have appropriate reception conditions, especially for families and children. And also Syrian refugees would likely be traumatized. And in the majority of countries, in many of countries, there is the specific mechanism or procedure to identify their special needs or vulnerabilities lacking, and this is something that is concern to us. So I mentioned briefly like some of the concerns that we think that Syrian refugees are facing, but like Western Europe too. For example, in November 2013, ECRE and the ELANA network, we produced the information note on the situation of Syrian refugees in Europe, where we were trying to indicate the bad practices and also to highlight best practices in Europe for Syrians. Unfortunately, it was quite easy to find the negative practices, but it wasn't that easy to find and promote the good practices across Europe. And following this information note, we launched the campaign, and I think many of you might be aware of this campaign. It is called Help Syrian Refugees. And as I mentioned before, we are focusing mostly on access to asylum procedures, including to the territory. At the moment, we think that the countries can improve and grant access to protection through embassies. For example, they can waive visa fees, they can apply flexible visa requirements, and they can also remove airport transit visas for people fleeing the Syrian conflict. Because all these excessive hurdles and like excessive bureaucratic burdens make Syrians unable to get protection in the European territory. Also, the countries can grant humanitarian visas to refugees fleeing the conflict so that they could leave the region. And the priority can be given for those with special needs, for example, for people in need of medical treatment, unaccompanied children, and other refugees with physical or security protection needs. Basically, we had information that some European countries, they do exercise this practice. They either grant some kind of humanitarian or protection visas, but like these practices are not being transparent, and in order to discourage refugees to use these means, these legal avenues, these kind of practices are not being made public. We also think that refugees should be given the possibility to apply for international protection through the embassies in the neighboring countries, and then they should be granted an entry permit in case of the positive response. Unfortunately, this is something which is not exercised, at least to our knowledge, is not exercised in Europe, and this is definitely the avenues that should be looked at. Also, the countries can offer other legal avenues for allowing people to leave the region safely and legally travel to the European countries. My colleague also from UNHCR mentioned the family reunification, and we think that family reunification rules should be made easier so that people who have family members living in Europe could easily join them. We also think that the broader definition of family members should apply. The family reunification should also include non-nuclear family members. And also the flexibility should be applied to the level of documentary requirements and proving family links and also travel documents. Also, we came across the situation where only a very limited number of embassies is in the countries neighboring Syria. They're considering the family reunification request, and we think that this is unnecessary bureaucracy, and I think more embassy should be dealing with these kind of cases. And also, the increase of the number of resettlement and humanitarian admission places should be another target. And like UNHCR colleague mentioned, UNHCR's pledges in this particular topic. But for example, so far only, to our knowledge, like around 19,000 people benefited from from resettlement humanitarian admission. And of course, this is not enough, and of course, the European countries can do more. We also think that all returns to Syria should continue to be suspended, and the returns to the neighboring countries should also be suspended. And countries should respect the principle of non-refoulement and guarantee the effective protection and effective sensitive water management. And also UNHCR and key NGO partners should get involved in the legal counseling at the border, and they should also be involved in the border monitoring and training activities. The countries should also take all the measures to prevent pushbacks at the external border, and the violation, this type of violation should also be investigated, and all the relevant measures should be taken. We also think that the access to effective and prompt asylum procedures should be guaranteed, and it should take into account the obligations under the Geneva Convention and the EU Charter. And the member states also should proactively apply the family provisions in the Dublin regulation, because that's another another issue of concern to us, because so far, like the member states, they do not always apply the family provisions, and we think that the respect for family life and the principle of family unity should be guaranteed. And also, the member states should apply discretionary clauses in the best interests of asylum seekers, including those fleeing the Syrian conflict. And we also think that the countries, because sometimes we get the worrying account on refugees being penalized for resorting to regular entry to Europe, and this is of course contrary to Geneva Convention, and the member states should refrain from these practices. Apart from the member states, we think that the European community should definitely take more, and we think that the European Commission, for example, should work out the guidelines of the common approach to humanitarian visas for protection reasons, and also should promote the use of the possibility to apply for international protection through the EU embassies in these third countries. We think that the funding opportunities for resettlement from Syria, and also emergency funding to address the situation of Syria's refugees within the EU and in the countries in the region should also be allocated and should be increased, and this should be promoted by the European Commission. And certainly the European Commission should also pursue the infringement proceedings against the states that are violating the EU asylum acquis and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. And we also think that Frontex separation should be carried out in a protection-sensitive way and in line with the fundamental rights strategy. And the use of ECRE and other sophisticated surveillance technology at the EU external borders should be used for the purpose of saving lives and shouldn't impede the access to international protection in the EU. In terms of EASO, EASA continues to enhance protection and reception capacity of some EU member states, and I think they should continue in doing so, but they also should work in close cooperation with UNHCR and the NGOs when they are carrying out their planning measures. So I think these are the main things that we think that Europe should do more, but also I think there is a lot of empathy in Europe at the moment to Syrian refugees, and I think the role of the media in covering the Syrian situation is also very important, and I think the public discourse should be moved from the financial implications from the countries, and also saying that, for example, sometimes certain countries, they don't have specific means to welcome refugees, but should also highlight the international obligation of these countries, and that these are the European democratic values, and human dignity should always be promoted and protected. So Europe should definitely do more to help Syrian refugees to find meaningful protection in Europe.